Hello, I'm Dr. Lisa Belisle, and you are listening to or watching our video podcast, Radio Maine, where we explore and celebrate creativity and the human spirit. We are sponsored by the Portland Art Gallery in Portland, Maine. And today I have with me artist Brian Reardon, who is with us at the Portland Art Gallery in Portland, Maine, and newly joined. So it's my pleasure to get to know you a little bit more, Brian.
Thank you for having me. This is pretty exciting and beautiful studio.
I love that when you were walking towards the studio, walking towards the door, you're just looking around with just the island admiration. And I feel that every day that I get up. So I feel like we might be kindred spirits in this.
A spectacular setting. The fog and mist coming off the ocean. Boy.
Yeah, it's a pretty amazing place to live.
Imagine.
And you've lived in some amazing places. I mean, you grew up in Vermont, and you've been in Rhode Island and Massachusetts, so you've had access to some of these areas.
I've been really fortunate. And Vermont, a majority of my life spent there. And I go back, family has property up there that their vacation home that we all descend upon them on the holidays. And that's very spectacular on Lake Champlain, Grand Isle. And Boston's fun and unique in its own way, the museums to go to. And I do like Rhode Island. There were some fantastic sunsets down along the water there while going through school, and 6 years after I lived there.
When we asked you about your background, one of the things that you brought up was that you always felt supported by your parents in your decision to go into art. And this is interesting because your father was, I believe, a chemical engineer with IBM.
Yes.
So you have, and I don't know what your mother was, but certainly as a scientist, for your father to support somebody down an art path is pretty wonderful.
Yes, and thank my lucky stars for that chance. And yeah, an engineer's mind and linear approach to things was interesting from my take on how to look at things. He was fantastic in support and for all of us. He basically wanted all his children to be the best they could be at what they were doing, as my mother as well. They were fantastic.
I think that's really important because you come from a family of 8. I come from a family of 10. My dad, I loved reading about how you would watch your dad and he would get dressed up every morning and he would be happy to go to work and do his thing and then, come back at the end of the day. And that was very similar to the way that my dad approached his life as a family doctor. And my mother as well, as a teacher and a mother, is, it was such an important thing to be able to. Dad, similarly, he had this little shirt that, he would have little short sleeves and wear a tie with it and little button down. And it was pretty much the same thing every morning. And I think he took such joy not only in his work, but supporting his family. That was such an important thing for him.
As well, and my family, too. It was a beautiful grounding for me to see. And I think for all of us, and being in a large family, we all have different interests and strengths and things we like to do. And for me, it happened to be could lose myself in time by drawing. And to be able to continue I was super lucky and just loved it. There were great examples and just the approach on things, his repeating of the Jesuit education of chance favoring the prepared mind, and a positive outlook. Give yourself a chance to do something. And so I'm just fantastically lucky. Miss them terribly, but we're just really fortunate. It's such a different world from what he, I think, would do, chemical engineering. I'm not exactly sure the solutions and that, but there was art to it, I imagine, in managing problems in people and how to get things done.
I think that you're right. I think there is art and creativity in the engineering, and I recall that there was a conversation you had with him about math and the simplicity and the artistry of math.
Yes, that was what I was thinking about. Thank you for reminding me. That conversation was, very frustrating for me in math. It felt like I had to paddle twice as hard to get to the same distance as the usual would do. But just learning that it is not it can be a concrete experience, but there is an art to the solutions that you arrive at. And this is, I believe, higher end math that I don't know anything about, but just to know that world exists made me a bit more aware of the possibilities. And it draws similarities between different worlds, so art, engineering, among everything.
Well, you and me both. I cannot claim any great affinity toward or any sort of great talent in the field of math per se. But I know after speaking with another artist recently, she talked about, for example, sacred geometry and this idea of geometry having this artistry to it and actually the spirituality to it. And I know that's not it's not the same type of high-level math that maybe some people think about, but I think you're right. I think this idea that the arrangements of things, the flow of things, the interpretation of things, and the creativity around all of that is really intriguing to think about, because it may not be the same as painting, but it is a way that the mind kind of works through things and appreciates things in a much more significant way.
Yeah, I think that can be true. And the golden rule, you're talking about math principles that can be brought up into interpretation and development of art. I think has some truths in there. And looking through the Renaissance, all art history, seeing examples of how things were broken up just to be able to understand it a little more, make it a little more accessible to the layman, and going through those steps in building imagery or basically paintings or drawings that can help. In proportion and all things when you're rendering something. It's been an aid. So
you're interesting in looking at your work, Brian, because you choose these objects that are so appealing. You and I were talking about Herbie, the VW bug. And of course there was a 70s, was it a TV show or a movie or maybe both?
I think early Disney movies in 1963 or 62 when they did several more, and I think they did a remake recently in the last decade. But the objects, usually it's something I find interesting and would like possibly to have, but you can't really have that in your living room, a full object, whether it be a car, a tractor, different objects that I find interesting, and that the play of light on, would like to just see how that would look in a painting. But they're usually, the objects are things that make me happy. There's not much beyond that if I'm doing it for myself, because when you're doing anything for yourself, you want to enjoy it. Visually, mentally, looking over the forms. And that's been the case with, the different tractors and cars and, the tractors are lucky finds on the travels back and forth to Vermont in the smaller farm fields. And as I mentioned, asking a farmer if it's okay to photograph their tractor, and then asking them what their favorite tractor is if they have multiples, and the best answer is the one that starts from them. It made me laugh because it was pretty real. Some of the tractors don't look like they'd run, but they it's a very green attitude. I think keeping old metal going, so you're not building more things into the earth to basically throw away. They're not throwing stuff away up there, and on any farm, I don't think. They try to make things go beyond their use as much as possible.
Yeah, I think that's such an interesting observation so you, with whether it's the VW bugs or whether it's a tractor or whether it's the Airstreams that you like to focus on, that there is some sort of ongoing usage for them beyond what we think about these days, the natural life of something electronic, for example.
Yeah, and different periods of industrial design, the forms, I think, speak to me a little. I enjoy, the Airstreams, the aerodynamic aspect of different vehicles, and how they all had a uniqueness. When you're passing an old car, if you know them a little bit, you can immediately think, oh, that's an old Buick, or that's an old Caddy, pardon me. Just a familiarity with these beautiful shapes. And again, it goes back, not too sophisticated. It made me happy, so I'm going to try and paint it. And they sometimes take on a life of their own in a way that I like to see them often. They're bubble cars, which are pretty fun. Unique shapes, and who is going to put themselves into that death trap? But I might if I could afford to have one. But just to know that they were, again, built out of necessity after the war, World War II, in Italy and Germany. Not a lot of metal laying around, so they're trying to make small people movers, and the unique shapes. It's just, again, made me happy to see.
And there is a nostalgia around this for, I think, a lot of people, because one of the early cars that my eventually then husband had was a VW Bug. It was a little yellow VW Bug. By the time he had it, it had a long life already. Mm-hmm. And so we could literally, if you moved the floor mats aside, you could actually see the road moving underneath us.
It's like the Flintstones.
Exactly,
yes.
like the Flintstones. And the heat actually, I'm pretty sure there was not air conditioning. There was vents. Yeah. The heat was on most of the time. So our air conditioning, as we would drive down Route 1, would be to roll the windows down all the way, and we would bring blankets in the winter because the heat didn't work that well.
No. Yeah.
And so I remember this all with such fondness because it was the first car that he and I knew together, and it was also the thing he could afford. Mm-hmm. He bought it from his college friend who bought it from somebody else, and it had already been going for probably 15 years by that time. So there's such nostalgia and such sort of connection to memories just in that description that I had. So I'm imagining that other people who are like you, looking at Airstreams and tractors and VWs, there is that connection to something in their past that brings up something really special and beautiful.
It's interesting to hear that you had a VW. One of my sisters had one in college, and forever heating your foot. I think those vents are always on for some reason. Winter, summer, fall. That car, yeah, that was a midnight blue colored Bug. I think she'll laugh when she hears of this, to remember that. It's interesting, the subject matters that you can come up with when painting, what strikes your fancy, and now it's tractors and cars and unique shapes.
And I do think there's actually something also interesting about the lack of safety around. I can't speak to tractors, but I know that the VWs, my mom described on the January night that she was going to the hospital with my father and she was in labor with me. They actually put my grandmother in the backseat of their VW Bug, sort of as ballast, because it wasn't very safe in the snow.
No,
So these are not practical things that we're dealing with.
No,
so there's even the sense somewhat of like a little bit living on the edge, a little bit of recklessness around owning these things, which is sort of part of the charm. And yet I don't know that I would want my children now to have one.
Yeah.
But it was an era.
To read about the charm is probably better than to expose yourself to the dangers of reckless machinery. But it is it's fun to see that they're still on the road and, safe.
Yeah, now they have safe versions of these things. Yes, which is not to disparage that company at all. It's just what it was at the time.
Sure. Oh, yeah. That's I do remember them not having a fabulous reputation for when they got in an accident. I don't think my mother was very fond of them because of that.
And this whole conversation is I love it so much because one of the things you brought up when we were asking you questions ahead of time was Joseph Campbell and the idea of following your bliss.
Yeah.
And this idea that you're painting things that make you happy, that you decided to become an artist because it was the thing that you connected with. And you had a career that, kind of put food on the table. But you always remain true to this idea of being an artist because it was the thing that, for whatever reason, you didn't have to explain it, but it was the thing that you were meant to do. This was following your bliss.
Again, I got very lucky in falling into a educational publishing at Houghton Mifflin Harcourt for 20 plus years. And some of that work dovetailed with painting and it took some, mental leap to find your way in that world where you can find art happening somewhat in a mathematical way in design that helped enrich the life that you're felt like you're on the right path, that it's using your abilities to greater or lesser degree. And all the while painting in the background, because it's whether it's just a need that you return to for that enrichment, for better or for worse, in a way to describe it. It makes you happy, and if you can do it, and you find time is suspended, you're in a bit of bliss. You somewhat feel that you're on the right way. You're doing what you should be doing or could be doing. Meanwhile, keeping your worldly needs accomplished by the day job, food, keeping the bear at the door, basically, which is a fabulous thing too. So I been very lucky in that manner of getting work that shades into artistic endeavors and working with people that were just super in helping along those ways.
So that piece is something that I always find fascinating is this. So you're keeping the bear at the door job.
Yeah.
And then you have the work that makes you happy. And then at some point you think, I'd like to bring this work out into the light of day.
Yes.
And that does take, I think, oftentimes encouragement from other people, which I believe you have had in order to say, I'm going to seek representation from a gallery, for example. I'm going to become affiliated with the Portland Art Gallery.
Yes.
And that's a very different and other skill set that
very different.
You need to have as well.
Portland Art Gallery has been fantastic in promotion, and the Wright Gallery, Allison Smith in Kennebunkport, My friends, the Beas, Tim Bea and Amy and their mom, they got me to show up at Kennebunkport at an annual Kennebunkport River Club art show in August. Fantastic setting, and got to meet a lot of terrific people, and got to meet Emma Watson at that show, and introduced myself and said, "Hey, what do you think of my work coming up to your gallery?" And she said, "Look at our website and pursue that." And over time, I got the chance to show here. But yeah, having friends in Boston, I'm in a gallery down there that is a collaborative gallery, the Atlantic Works Gallery in East Boston, and they're very open to people who are first time stepping into the art world and showing, giving you a showcase where you can present your work. And that work, the steps of doing that is a great. It allows you to fall without skinning your knees too hard. That type of feeling, like it's gonna be okay, but do put yourself out there. Do what you've been training to do, and in all things, if you're a great skater, skate, or can throw a ball well, throw the ball well. Be what you've developed to be. And yeah, the people have been fantastic in helping, really supportive. My friends, I don't know if I name them all. Or
Like you're winning an Oscar.
Yeah, no.
All the people I'd like to thank.
Yeah. And my family's always been terrific. And I don't know, you come from a large family, and it can be great fun, boisterous. Love that. And, I'm of the group, I'm one of the quieter ones. And so I may not be noisy, but I take great joy in the noise. And I love that when we're all together. And they're always encouraging and always curious about how things are going. And the same with my friends. And they're kind enough to put my work on their walls in the Boston area as well. And yeah, good friends that, I have a very good artist friend, Walter Kopech, who's opened my ideas to what's possible. And he is a curious individual in a great way of looking at art and wanting it to see where it can go. He's more conceptual in his work and execution, but it's a very rewarding work to see. For the viewer, I like that. It's sort of I believe it's a connection when you look at a piece and you get a kick out of it. It makes, I think, whether the artist knows it or not, a nice web of life. I had a professor once at school who was very, very witty gentleman, and he had made a display, a small living room display that you could hold in your hand. It was in the corner of a large gallery, so you had to stoop down to look at it, and you're like, "What is this about?" And I was near somebody, and they're looking at it, and they picked the little stuffed ottoman chair up, and on the bottom of the chair it says, "Please put it back down." And that was the whole piece, to get somebody to pick it up and to be told to put it back. And it just made me so happy to see that. And, knowing this professor, I think he was happy too. So finding a connectivity and with friends and family and viewers that come to look at work, I get I like that idea.
And I think that's such a great thing that I can also relate to, that when I go to the art gallery, and I'm there at least once a month because of the openings, and I walk around, and I feel kind of bathed in the enjoyment of the art, and also connecting with other people who are enjoying the art. And to do something for no other reason that it either makes you happy or somehow it engenders an emotion within. I mean, that's not something that we always have the ability to do in day-to-day lives.
It's a luxury. Yeah, I think. Yeah, I agree. It is a luxury to spend time soaking something in. And selfishly, I try to find that when I run to the museum, and I'm horrible because I have heroes that I run to go see in the museum, and I should could the pardon me, look for more wide-ranging experiences in the art, but often it's the desire to look and research something that I'm working through in handling of the medium, and to see how somebody had executed it before, and to a great degree, usually because it's in a museum, for gosh sakes, and might want to pick up that idea on how to get something done, and then to see the humor and in the execution, and some just people showing off with the brushwork, Sargent, and that, to see some of those transitions with his work and others. It's like in sports, seeing a well done execution of a pitch, a hit.
I can appreciate this. I mean, I can appreciate what you're saying about just it can be very subtle. It can be a very small thing. And you can look at something and just think, wow. No rational reason, wow. I mean, yeah. I love the showing off with the brushstrokes that you're describing of Sargent, because this understanding that back when he was painting, there probably was something that was, he was really enjoying that aspect of his work.
It's tough to, when you look at his work, to say, boy, he's at a very incredible level, and I think the rest of us are with spoons and peanut butter down low and working away. But there's a horse hoof. I think it's a French. I'm sorry, I'm not remembering it, but it's one of these grand salon pieces that's 28 feet by 16 feet, and the horse hoof in the lower corner is only part of it's painted, and the rest of it's open canvas, which is sort of a beautiful, warm olive tan. You step back 3 feet, and it all snaps together as the horse hoof. But you walk up, and you see it's an incomplete, in a way, execution that you would, from that period of painting where all the canvas is covered, with some degree of paint, and this individual left it open on the foot, and it's just a cheeky move. It's a curveball when you expected a fastball. When looking at it, it makes me laugh.
There is something about, as you and I are talking, this idea of humor that is, it really appeals to me, because I do think oftentimes it's easy to take life seriously, because there are a lot of very difficult things that happen in life.
Sure, yeah.
And also, life can be really kind of funny if you allow yourself to be open to that possibility. And I love that you're pulling these ideas out of art, and you're thinking, like, what was going on in this artist's mind and existence?
Looking through art history, finding incidences of that, examples where you expect one thing, you get another. It can happen in color, handling of the medium, emotional message. You'll hopefully arrive at the intent of the artist, but often we're on our own, and we can chase off down a rabbit hole and come up with some crazy ideas. But humor and execution, it goes back towards the bliss. But I grew up around some very funny people, and always on the edge of something's going to happen that's going to be funny. So again, lucky that way.
And I had that in my family too. I mean, in particular, oftentimes my husband, Kevin Thomas, who owns the Portland Art Gallery, he has a hard time completely understanding the sort of the a little bit cheeky, actually, the word that you used earlier, humor that some of my brothers and sisters have, and not all of them have it.
Yes.
So you kind of have to know who's sort of the slyly funny one and how to respond.
Yes.
Because, and actually, I know that with my husband, he actually has it in his family too.
Oh, great.
So it is kind of fun to be around that and to know, like, yeah, some people are also understanding that you can look at life with a slightly different eye and find the humor.
Oh, yes. Brothers and sisters that are terribly funny, and villains in board games, and just that's when the holidays are great. You get to rekindle those reasons for them driving you nuts, and then laughing yourself to tears a bit, and just great fun. For 10 brothers and sisters, wow, that's incredible. And 8 for us, and knock on wood, we're all kicking and going, and the humor helps, I think, round the corners.
Yeah, and I think that when you describe the need to kind of pull back and go in your room and do your own thing and be quiet, I think I've also, growing up in a large family, that was always my thing as well, is that I would be around the joyful chaos, sometimes not always joyful chaos, but a lot. There was a lot going on, which I did come to appreciate and still appreciate now. Yeah. But then to be able to, for me, it was always going into my room. And for many years, it was in the attic. And I would go to my room in the attic, and I would just read books for hours and hours and hours.
That sounds great.
And that counterbalance, right?
Yeah.
Of being able to be external and internal. And if you're from a large family, it's a ready-made external that you're always part of.
Yeah, that's exactly. And I think my mom was from a large, and dad, they had 4 boys, but my mom's side, again, 8. I'll get yelled at because I screwed that up. But they had the same dynamic of, I believe, individuals who were more reserved and quiet and studious, and some that were just hair on fire. Look out, here comes some fun. And I love seeing the whole range, and to know it's interesting that you would have an escape to, finding, and reading is such a great thing because, you're an author in your head, just following these storylines.
And I don't know what your family was like, but in my family, the thing that I've come to really appreciate, and we recently went through the loss of my father, and he was so special to all of us. And in working through this loss with my brothers and sisters, I just came to understand that we each had such a profound respect for one another. We clearly did not approach things with regard to my father or many other things in the same way. We clearly had grown into adults that had different perspectives, points of views, experiences. But I always come away with, at least in my family, the sense of respect and love. And I may not understand you, but it's okay if you want to go in your room and read for hours on end. That's going to be okay, which I don't think everybody has. So I have come away in my life as the oldest of 10 with feeling very fortunate.
I think being oldest is a challenge sometimes that, I know our oldest siblings are, they set a standard and a way of doing things that is pretty impressive to see and try to fall in with. But yeah, everybody's unique and different, and again, the echoes of the parents' sayings, love and respect, and super lucky to have been in that milieu.
And the thing that I also loved about and love about my family, and again, this is something that if you're not from a large family, sometimes it's hard to understand, is the potential for always having each other's backs. So we are fiercely, fiercely protective of one another. We may squabble on the inside, but on the outside, we're pretty much a unified front. And I know that not all large families go in this direction, but it's pretty amazing to grow up in essentially like a mini, basketball team.
Yeah.
Where you've always got the point guards.
Yeah.
You've always got people are protecting the perimeter and you trade off. And so I think when I think about your life as an artist and kind of the need to have that, to feel like in order to protect this interiority, you actually have to have some sort of boundaries externally. And in this case, they come in the form of your people.
Yeah, and I agree. And it kind of it extends to friendships. Lucky to have great friends that put up with he's gone away and he's making something sort of sensation. Hopefully they put up with that. But it's a needed thing to have these contacts and people and love to connect with, and that just makes life worth living. Family and friends. It just so happens that you get a chance to paint, and that means something to me. It can be for anybody the chance to read, a chance to sew or farm, or friends who are carpenters, and they make fantastic things. And I can just sit back and marvel and say, yeah, I'd like to have that object, that kind of, but the abilities dedication that they show is, it just reinforces the idea that you can fall into work that can mean for a great life. And it can be anything. Again, math, engineering, the sciences, medical field. So I've just been really fortunate to be allowed to pursue what I'm doing. And knock on wood, hope to keep going.
I wish that for you as well, Brian.
Thank you.
I've been speaking with artist Brian Reardon, who is now affiliated, to our great fortune, with the Portland Art Gallery in Portland, Maine. I'm Dr. Lisa Belisle, and you have been listening to or watching Radio Maine. I encourage you to come to one of our openings to see Brian's work in person, or certainly you can go to the Portland Art Gallery website, and I think you will similarly feel drawn to these lovely, nostalgic elements of design in his pieces, as I myself have been. Artist Brian Reardon, thanks so much for coming in and speaking with me today.
Thank you so much, Doctor. This is great. Scary, but great.